live. Welcome this Sunday night. Enjoy the podcast and live cams.
Hello and welcome into the Sunday edition of Darkness Radio. I'm Tim Dennis in for Dave Schrader. Again, we mentioned yesterday, it's been a little bit of a tragic week this week as Dave's father-in-law, Ed Field, passed away during the week suddenly. We want to extend our condolences to Winnie, Dave's lovely bride, who lost her father this week. And, of course, extend our condolences to Winnie's sister, Kelly, as well. We dedicate today's program and, of course, yesterday's program to the memory of Ed Field. Today's program is an interesting one indeed, and one that Dave had picked out earlier this week. And it comes from February of 2016, February 26th of 2016. Our first guest for the first couple of hours, quote unquote, although the program only runs 2 hours this Sunday, is Detective Robert Snow. And he talks about his encounter with an angel and the remarkable signs of angelic contact up until that contact with the angel. In the third hour of the program, and I use air quotes when I say the third hour of the program, we talk with famed author Ptolemy Thompkins and Officer Tyler Beddoes and his contact with an angel and past lives. That comes up in today's program. And without further ado, we'll get into that program right now.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. This is the best in paranormal talk radio. Darkness Radio is on the air. I'm Dave Schrader. That's Tim Dennis. Tim, tonight we've got an interesting look at angels. Proof of Angels, the definitive book on the reality of angels and the surprising role they play in each of our lives. That's later on in the show. Ptolemy Thompkins and Tyler Beddoes will join us to discuss that. Some of the more current miracles and fascinating stories. Speaking of fascinating stories, Robert Snow is going to spend the first couple hours with us this evening, and he's the author of Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic, the true story of a police detective's reincarnation. And I know you and I are fascinated by the idea behind reincarnation.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And, you know, when you hear these stories of kids having these memories of things that they shouldn't know, family bonds and ties that they still feel as though they're related to those people in this lifetime. Sometimes so strongly they don't even feel connected to their actual biological family. Mm-hmm. And those are kind of heart-wrenching stories to me.
They are, yeah.
You know, when you get to, and some of these children, it's usually in a lot of these foreign countries, you know, and the children are like, no, this is my family. You know, and they're relating to their old family. Mm-hmm. That's got to be brutal as a parent to deal with. And wanting to just kind of pick up where your life left off, but now you're in the body of a child. You know, that's right. Just got to be a head trip to try to figure your way around. Not often do we hear solid stories of proof of adults' reincarnation. Right? I mean, think about it. we hear about all the kid stories all the time. Sherry Lee Laird, who did the Marilyn Returns story, that was when she was an adult family that she found out.
That's got to be
a fascinating episode too. We should dig that out of the archive sometime because I really like that one. That was a neat story. But most of the reincarnation tales we hear, and see, I'm always concerned too when you're an adult and you go get reincarnation memories back from regression hypnotherapy sessions and things. I was talking to Jen, a listener. She was telling me she's always felt a tie to like the Civil War and World War II. Okay. And she thinks she might be reincarnated from that time.
Okay.
Well, if you have that feeling in your mind already, if you go in for a regression and you're already kind of predisposed to think that because you feel an affinity for that part of history, were you truly reincarnated? Or because of your fascination and the things you've seen and the stories you've read and the history classes you've taken, do you start to superimpose your own story into that?
It's a very good question.
Now, in some cases, I guess, unless you can get specific, and if you can get down and dirty and you're, Tim, your name was Duncan Jones, and you were in Civil War, you were in Battalion 52 of the Kentucky fighting whatever, right? And we go look and we research and bam, there's the list, and bam, there's Duncan Jones. That, to me, that's fascinating. Unless, of course, you've gone over those research books before and that name jumped out at you because you like Dunkin' Donuts and there's the name Duncan, right? And it just kind of stuck with you.
It's a good way to tie it together.
Right. So you've got to, that's why I would love to go in for a regression. But I'm so fearful because of the things and the time eras I feel so pulled towards that I'm either going to, this is my thought. I was in the 20s and in the 50s. And those will be my story points. That's what I believe will come out. Unless they somehow take me back and I'm, a Roman gladiator. But that seemed like a lot of work and really bad pay and hot sun.
And you were outside all the time.
Yeah, which may explain why I hate all that now. Who knows? Yeah. But I would think because I have such a fascination with the Roaring 20s and the 1950s, I might end up finding myself in those places. How do you separate that? Even the best hypnotherapist, how can they tell you this is it? Unless, like I said, if they take me back and my name was Nathan Spatz Baxter in the 1920s and I was a gun runner for, Ma Barker or something, you can actually look in and find these names.
Right.
I have such a hard time. I want to believe, in this case, I'm the molder. I want to believe that we come back and that we get more shots at this.
I've had a couple of experiences that I can't verify, but they definitely would point towards past lives. And one of them, and I'll just say it real quick, it was very bizarre. I was doing a healing session with an energy worker. And most of the time, and I'll be blunt with you, those sessions don't work with me.
Right.
But this particular person was doing some very powerful stuff, moving around energy, and looked at my stomach and went, oh, hold on a second. And put their foot on the chair I was sitting on and acted like they were pulling a sword out of my stomach. The minute that this person started doing that, I felt extreme pain in my stomach. He pulled 5 swords out of my stomach. And by that time, the pain was gone. And he said, you were a samurai in a past life.
Oh, a samurai. I would have thought sword swallower in a circus sideshow.
But no. And that I was killed by taking multiple swords.
Good grief.
Yeah.
But you could physically feel.
I could physically feel him pulling each one out. Because the time he pulled the first one out, I felt like my stomach was going to explode. And then it got better as he pulled out the other 4. It was to me amazing. I'd never felt anything like that before.
And what's strange to me is that you don't have an affinity towards the Japanese culture.
No, I do.
I never knew that about you. We've been friends 28 years. You've hidden that from me?
Well, it's not something I really tell a lot of people about.
Obviously, we need counseling.
Well, and then this is going to seem really weird, too. Sure. When I went down for the Paranormal Disney World trip, when I got to the Japanese village in Epcot, I started to tear up. I had no idea why, but I felt like I was home.
Because you realized how much you paid to get into Epcot Center?
And I paid $46 for a Slurpee. So, yeah.
That might have been really what set you up.
That would make me cry, too, yeah.
So, but you've had these flashes, things that you weren't really aware that you had those connections until somebody told you, right?
Right, correct.
And then things made sense. You didn't go there expecting to have Japanese samurai swords pulled from you.
Exactly.
What fascinates me about the guest that we're going to talk with now, he is a veteran police detective. So again, not and I don't want to put other people down, but not a gullible source, somebody who, spends most of the day watching Maury and Jerry Springer, and maybe their minds can be manipulated. That's all I'm saying.
I watch a lot of Maury and Jerry Springer.
Well, I make my point. Okay. But he's a veteran police detective. Robert Snow was devoted to evidence and hard facts. He'd never given any thought to reincarnation, but during a hypnotic regression, he experienced a very vivid awareness of being alive in 3 separate historical scenes. He's joining us for the first 2 hours this evening. His book, Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic, the true story of a police detective's reincarnation. Robert, thank you for joining us this evening.
Well, thank you for having me on.
I'm sure you could hear us as we're discussing at the beginning of the show here, the skepticism behind the idea of reincarnation. And it never had crossed your mind. Had you had, now that you're an adult and you look back, and now that you understand the past lives, do you ever look back and see moments or dreams, visions that seem to now correlate with what you now know about yourself that seem to make more sense?
Not that sort of thing, but looking at life through a different viewpoint than I had before, life makes sense. The life, not necessarily any of the, and no supernatural revelations, but if you look at life through a reincarnation viewpoint rather than a one shot's all you get, viewpoint, my life makes a lot more sense. Now you can see why certain things happened, and why certain things happened to you that drove you toward a certain goal.
Did you have, growing up, any kind of strange memories or visions, dreams that seemed to beckon you to a different time or place, or where you were unrecognizable to yourself?
Absolutely not. Before I started this investigation into the regression, I had absolutely nothing, zero of any kind of supernatural occurrences in my life. I had absolutely nothing. And that's why I went into this with such a hard-nosed attitude that I thought reincarnation was foolishness. It was just wishful thinking by people who don't want to think they never get another chance.
All right, so fair enough. Now, talk to me as a police officer. A lot of cops, especially detectives I know, have kind of a heightened sixth sense about them anyway because of the work that they're in, the danger that they can, pose, and these situations. Have you felt in touch psychically in that sense with your surroundings when you go to places and can pick up on vibes of energy, of negativity, or things that maybe normal people would walk right through without any idea?
No, it's not really that. It's just when you have enough experience and you have in police work, you know what to watch out for. You know what to look at. I never felt that was any kind of otherworldly thing or any kind of sixth sense. It's just you've been here, you've done it long enough. You know what to look for. You know when people are not acting right. You know when you need to watch someone very closely because they're acting funny. It's more. I think it's more. I've always felt that before I got involved in this, I never felt it was anything other than just your training and experience that makes you a very, very. Police officers are more aware than most people of their surroundings because it means it often can mean your life or death.
Right.
So you're very, very careful about your surroundings and you evaluate them very carefully. But I always felt that it came mostly from my experience and training.
All right, we need to take a break. When we come back, for a man that had never given a thought to reincarnation, never had flashes, memories, images, dreams of past lives, what would make him open that door? What would bring him to the point of wanting to research this or go through a hypnotherapy regression series? Well, we'll talk with our guest. His name is Robert Snow. The book is Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic, the true story of a police detective's reincarnation. Robert, I had you on Coast to Coast with me earlier, and we had a fascinating talk. What I found interesting was a large portion of the audience, well, not a large, but definitely a vocal part of the audience reached out and said, you were so combative, you questioned everything, you're so skeptical of your guest, you've got to give in to them. And I thought, here's a cop, here's a detective who is a skeptic. I mean, it's right in the copy title of his book, Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic. If we just roll over and accept these things as reality without questioning how this came about, how this developed for you, I don't think we're doing you any favor because we're not giving you a chance to really kind of sell the book. But it's also, like you didn't just walk into this believing that it existed and look for proof to back up that theory, correct?
No, absolutely. Actually, it was quite the opposite. My whole intent during my whole investigation was to prove it wrong, to prove that reincarnation did not exist. Because if you do accept it, then you have to change your whole worldview, and that was something I wasn't willing to do on just any kind of evidence. And so I was the biggest skeptic of all until the very last, when finally the evidence mounted so heavily on the other side, I had to finally say, well, maybe it is this. But no, there's nothing wrong with being skeptical at all. You need to be very skeptical, and I certainly was.
All right, well, explain to me, if you will, how you go from a skeptical observer and then suddenly decide, I want to test reincarnation. I mean, how did that paradigm even open up to you?
Well, it actually came because of a dare. I've always been a very avid reader my whole life. Always do a lot of reading, and consequently I belong to a number of book clubs. Well, one book club had a book on a blurb that says "Coming Back." The name of the book is "Coming Back" by Dr. Raymond Moody, and it looked kind of interesting. He's talking about Dr. Moody had apparently done investigation to near-death experiences, and he apparently had a friend who was a past life regressionist who talked him into being hypnotized and regards to past lives. And the book is about his experience doing it. And I ordered the book from the book club, and I got it, and I read it, and very well-written book, very interesting. He goes back to 8 or 9 past lives, and just under hypnotism, and he talks about them and everything. But it's kind of funny. At the end of the book, he kind of hedges and says, I'm not really sure what this is. I'm not really sure. I don't know if it's just my imagination. He wouldn't really say it's past lives. That's kind of the way I felt about it. I thought, it's interesting. But anything you saw during hypnosis, just memories from your subconscious mind of this life, you simply reorder them or restructure them to fit a scenario that the hypnotist is asking you to do. And when you're into hypnotism, you're kind of prone to suggestion. I figured that's all it was. So anyway, I read the book, and it was interesting. Then I went on and read the books and forgot all about it. Well, a couple months later, I'm at a party. It's a party put on by the police department, and there was a woman there works at the police department, and she's a psychologist. And her and I were just making small talk, about movies we'd seen and everything. We started talking about books we read, and I remembered this book, and I mentioned to her I'd read it. I didn't know at the time that she used past life regression in her practice. And she asked me what I thought about the book, and it was kind of late in the party, and I had a bit to drink, and I kind of put it down. I was telling her how silly I thought it was, that, people, this is just wishful thinking by people who want to be able to blame bad things in this life. It's not really their fault that their life's a mess. It's, bad karma from previous lives. And I really put the book down and put the whole idea of reincarnation down pretty much. And, it's kind of late, and you've been drinking. You kind of probably think I was probably a little obnoxious. But she was very nice. She was very kind about it. But she listened to me put down reincarnation stuff. And she finally dared me. She says, if you think it's so stupid, why don't you try it and see if you think it's so stupid? And I first said, no, I'm not doing that. And she got to the same point, oh, you're scared, are you? You don't want to ask a man if he's scared. Right. Of course you're not scared. And like I said, I had a little drink. So I said, sure. I said, I'd do it. And she wrote down a name on a card of a colleague of hers who did past life regression. Well, the next morning, you get up and you're a little more clear-headed, and you're thinking, I ain't doing that. That's stupid. So I just basically, I wasn't going to do it. But it seems like every day I would run to this woman, this psychologist. And so before this, I didn't seem like I run into her very often at all. It seemed like every day I'd run into her, and she'd ask me, have you made your appointment? And I'd make some kind of, excuse, or, no, I had, 2 meetings, and I had to do this. And it's like every day, I said, God, there she is again, And it was day after day, I'd run into her, and she'd always ask me the same question. And it got to a point you just know you're going to see her again, You're going to make up some other feeble excuse. Finally, I got on the point, I got tired of it. I said, okay, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to make the appointment. I'm going to go there. Now, I'm going to cooperate 100% with this psychologist, and I'm going to show that this is all foolishness because nothing's going to happen. I said, there is no way they're going to take me past life because that doesn't exist. And so I finally called the psychologist and made an appointment. And she told me when I made this, Dr. Mary Ellen Griffith. And she told me I could bring my own tape recorder if I wanted to, which I thought was a great idea because I wanted to go back to the police department psychologist with his tape recording and show her how stupid the whole thing was, that absolutely nothing happened during the regression. And so anyway, that's basically how I got talked into going and doing a past life regression.
So you go on this bet, you go and you're going to record it, which is great because, as you said, now you can tell if you're being compromised. Is she leading you? Is she pushing you to have these false memories? And you go in to do this. And as you said, you're skeptical in nature. Walk us through that first meeting and doing this. How many regressions did you go in for total?
Actually, I went for two. One was later on because after the first regression, I was trying to find more information on one of the regressions I was in. I went back for a second one. It didn't really work as well as I thought. But the first one, anyway, I went and seen Dr. Griffiths. Very nice lady, very, very nice. Had kind of a funny musical type sing-songy voice, very relaxing voice. A nice, very nice lady. I went and I went to my appointment. And she asked me, she says, well, what kind of problems do you think you have and need help with? And I told her, well, none. I just think past life regression sounds interesting. I want to try it. Well, she didn't have any problem with that. She said, okay, no problem. Has me sit on this couch. She said, it looks like a regular psychiatrist, psychologist's office. Got a desk and a chair and a big long couch. So I sit down. I wasn't going to lay down. I wasn't going to be a patient. So I just sat down. She told me, close your eyes. So I closed my eyes. And she said, tell me something about your college graduation. So I went and told her about my college graduation. And she said, okay, tell me about something that happened in high school, then grade school, then, preschool, just kind of thing. And I can see what she's doing. Every memory is getting further back in my life. And, I thought at the moment she certainly wouldn't be a very good interrogator because you could anticipate her next question. And if you're an interrogator, you never want the person you're questioning to know what you're going to ask next. But anyway, she kept going down and down, and I knew what she was doing, But again, I was just cooperating, trying to be good. I was going to, tell her, do what I had to do and, cooperate, but just to show this was foolishness. So anyway, she finally got down to my earliest memories, and she finally said, okay. Says, can you see a balloon? Imagine a balloon. Well, I was sitting there with my eyes closed. I could see a big purple blob in my eyelids, which I knew was just light from the window coming into my right. So I told her, yeah, I can see a purple balloon. She said, okay. She said, now imagine yourself getting in the balloon and taking off. So I'm still cooperating. I'm saying, okay. So I'm imagining myself getting the balloon, taking off. She says, can you see lights down below you? And it's funny. Down at the bottom of my eyelids, it looked like I could see little points of light, but I assumed it would just glare off the floor. So anyway, she said, okay. Then she tried to get me to land. She says, okay, now I want you to land the balloon. Well, but, again, this is her daydream, not mine. I wasn't going to, make up anything. I wasn't going to make up anything to make her happy, and nothing happened. She said, okay, land. What do you see? And, there's nothing. I said, there's nothing happened. Again, like I said, this is my daydream. This is yours. And we went through this scenario probably 10, 12 times about landing the balloon. She told there's a control above your head, pull letting the balloon go down, and it didn't. Just again, and the more this happened, the more I thought, see, this is just foolish. This is just people who are trying to please a psychologist, and you'll imagine anything they want you to imagine, type thing. So anyway, we went through this scenario about 10 or 12 times. Finally, she said, okay. She said, obviously, these are places you don't want to go. She said, now, in your mind, imagine a mountain. So I tried to imagine a mountain in my mind. She said, okay, now land a balloon on the mountain. At this time, I must have been getting kind of tired because I'd been sitting there probably 20 minutes on this couch, my eyes closed. She had the unbelievably hardest couch. My buttocks are always starting to ache. I'm sitting there, my back's starting to hurt. I'm sitting there anyway. So I could actually see. I could see my balloon land on the mountain. But it's all imagination, like she told me. I said, okay. She said, okay, there's a cabin there. Go in the cabin. I said, what do you see? And I didn't see nothing. I said, nothing. Again, this ain't my daydream. I said, I don't see anything. So she told me to imagine this, imagine that, but imagine a lot of food and a lot of light. And so I'm trying to imagine. So we got done. She said, okay. She said, there's some steps out of the cabin that go down to a valley. She says, there's 12 steps. I want you to go walk down the steps, and I'll count the steps as you walk down. And so I said, okay, I'm trying to imagine myself. I'm trying to be cooperative. I'm trying to imagine myself walking down 12 steps. I'm walking, and she's counting. She says, 12. And each number is getting longer. It's 11, 10. And, everybody's seen, people, movies or TV programs,
right.
Hypnotists. You know what she's doing. I'm thinking, oh God, I'm thinking, what am I doing here? And she's going 8, 7. So I'm still trying to cooperate. I'm imagining myself walking down these steps. When she got to 1, something really bizarre happened. All of a sudden, I was in a valley. I don't mean that I could imagine a valley, or I could, what I thought a valley might look like. I was standing in a valley. The funny thing was, I knew I was sitting in the psychologist's office because I could still feel the couch under my buttocks, and I could hear her if she moved the chair next to me. But at the same time, I was standing in a valley. And the really scary part, not scary, but kind of startling part was, it was so vividly clear. It was as clear as any reality. I looked around, the funny thing, the leaves moving, I could feel a breeze in my face. I assumed it was just the air conditioning in the office. Now, I knew what this was. I mean, I'm not real stupid. I figured, Bob, you've been hypnotized. That's all it is. This is hypnotism. Now, when I went there, I didn't think it could happen. I didn't think I could be hypnotized, but again, I'm not stupid. I knew what happened. This is part of hypnotism. You've been hypnotized. But to be honest with you, it wasn't, because when we first started this thing, she kept telling me about this, how the white light will go around me, protect me, and all that, in case I say anything bad. There wasn't any, I couldn't imagine what I'd see to be that scary, but there wasn't nothing scary about this situation. Actually, it was kind of like finding the best, coolest ride you'd ever seen in an amusement park.
Sure.
Now, if you go to a lot of these rides, they look awful real. They feel awful real. But they're not. You're not really in a rocket ship. You're not really in an airplane. But it looks that way and it feels that way.
Robert, she walks you through this hypnotic state, brings you down, and suddenly you're bilocating in a sense. You know and you're aware that you're in the office, sitting on the hard couch, being guided by her, but you're now in this, what did you call it, like a valley?
It was like very, very heavily forested valley. And again, I knew what this was like. It wasn't frightening. It wasn't scary. It was kind of startling when it first happened, but it wasn't frightening. It was more fascinating. It's kind of like the thing, like what people take LSD for, without the danger of the drugs, needless to say. It's kind of like it was so, not bizarre, but just so startling. It was neat, really. And I thought this is kind of fun, honestly. So anyway, she's asked me to describe the valley, and I'm describing this valley. And she said, "Look down, describe yourself." Now, I didn't remember it until after I went home later on the night and listened to the tape. But before we got to the last step in the valley, she told me, "I want you to go back to your very first life, the very first life you lived on this earth." I remember that later because I looked down and I could see just some bare feet and real kind of hairy and gnarly-looking legs. And I was wearing fur. In my left hand, I had a big piece of tree limb. Now, everybody knows what cavemen look like. I knew what I saw.
Oh, I thought you were describing Zsa Zsa Gabor.
Yeah, I knew exactly what it was. I thought, and then again, I thought this guy, I thought it was kind of amusing at the moment when I saw it, because I could see I was like a caveman. I was wearing fur and carrying a big piece of a tree limb, and so I'm walking along the valley, and she's telling me, she's asking things, and I'm telling them, and all of a sudden, it's kind of funny. It's kind of like a part of my mind that I didn't know about opened, and I started saying things without knowing what I was going to say. They just bubble off my lips before I realized I'd said them. Because I was walking my valley, and I looked up the side of the valley, and there was a kind of a rocky outcropping, and I said, "This is where I live." And I remember thinking, I was kind of surprised. I didn't know I was going to say that. Bob Snow didn't know where this was, but the person whose body I was in knew this was their home.
Right.
So she said, "Okay," says, go to where you live. So, but funny, this time I didn't walk there. It was kind of like a gray fog for a few seconds. And next thing I knew, I'm at the mouth of a cave. Mm-hmm. But the really bizarre part of this was I walked in. This person was obviously not very hygienic because it had when I walked in, there's this awful stench. And I remember thinking at the moment, where could this come from? It was an awful smell of a person who'd had many years of unhygienic living. And I thought, where the world could that come from? Because just for a few moments, I get this awful stench. So anyway, we go on, and I described to her my life there and everything, and she finally told me, she says, "I want you to go to your death. Go to your death and tell me what you see." So again, there'd be a couple of minutes. It was like a gray fog. I wouldn't see anything. And then all of a sudden, I wasn't in the body any longer. I was about 10 feet above it, floating. And I looked down. I could see a little man laying on the cave floor, covered with furs. He was shivering and coughing. And you could see he was really, really sick. And she said, "Okay." I described that to her. She said, "Okay." She said, "Go out of the cave and look up and see if you see a light." So I go out of the cave, and sure enough, there was a big, bright light over the valley. And she said, "Now go to the light." She says, but before I did that, again, I started talking. I didn't realize I was going to say. All of a sudden, I just blurted out. I said, "This was a bad life." I said, "I was supposed to learn what it was like to be completely alone. I didn't have anyone in this life at all. I wanted to see what it was like to have no one." So Dr. Rivers said, "Okay." He said, "Go into the light." He said, "Now I want you to go to a lifetime when you did have someone." And I'm thinking, I don't know, whatever. So anyway, I go to the light, and again, there's a few seconds of gray fog. And then the next thing is when the fog starts clearing away, I'm on a city street. But I can see it's a pretty good-sized city, but I can tell it's not present day because there's horse-drawn carriages and gas lights. And I'm walking along the street. The really bizarre thing was, it was a very sunny day, and I could feel the sun beating down on me. Now, I'm in a dark and closed office where this is all happening. I thought how strange that was. Again, I knew what it was. I knew it was a hypnotism, but I thought how strange, because I could feel the heat from the sun coming down on me. I thought, boy, that's strange. So I'm walking along the street, and she asked me, she said, "Where are you going?" I said, again, Bob Snow didn't know what he was going to say, but whoever body I was in did. It said, "I'm going to meet a woman." She She says, okay. She says, go. She said, what happens? So I meet this woman, and we go to a sidewalk cafe, and I order a glass of wine, and she orders kind of special water. And so then Dr. Griffith said, okay, now go 5 years ahead. She said, go 5 years ahead in your life. So again, there's a few seconds of gray fog, and all of a sudden I see myself, I'm in the hallway of an apartment, and arguing with a woman who I tell Dr. Griffith is my wife. I'm having some kind of argument with her. I'm not sure what it was about, but we have an argument, and I just had to turn and walk away, and I walked down the hall into another room, and it's an artist studio. The room is a very long room. The roof is a skylight, and the right wall on my right is all windows. And there's just dozens and dozens of paintings hanging around there. And again, Bob Stowe didn't know, but the person by us in knew this is where he worked. I told Dr. Griffith, I said, this is where I work. I paint. I said, I paint portraits, but I hate painting portraits. I said, I paint them, but I said, I need the money. And I said that 4 or 5 times, that I need the money, how much I hated painting portraits, but I need the money. So we went through a couple moments of this, everything, and she told me, she says, go another 5 years ahead of life. And I go and I'm at a party, and everybody's come up and congratulating me for some reason. I have no idea what it's for, but I'm at a party and everybody's congratulating me for something. It's kind of, and again, all this stuff is really fascinating. Again, it's like finding the coolest ride at an amusement park and wanting to go over and not wanting to get off of it. And that's what I thought this was, is all.
Now, when you're having these thoughts, are you seeing through the eyes of this person, or are
exactly.
you? Okay, so it's like you're in a third party video game. You're looking through the eyes of this reincarnated body.
You can look down and see yourself, but you're still looking through this other person's eyes. So finally, Dr. Griffith said, okay, now go to your death. So I would go to your death and tell me what you see. So I go and I see myself laying on bed, and I see myself die, and I see my spirit rising by my body and going to the roof of this building. Now everybody knows what ghosts do. I wasn't something stunning me, because everybody knows what ghosts do. Of course, you can go through walls. So anyway, I go up and I see it's nighttime, and I'm floating over a really huge city. There's lights for miles in all directions, just lights everywhere. And as Dr. Griffith told me, he said, okay, he said, now look up, go into the light. This is the funny thing about hypnotism. People seem to think when you're hypnotized, you're totally under controlled hypnotist. They can make you get up and cluck like a chicken and do all kinds of stuff. That's not really true. When you're under hypnotism, you still know what's going on. You're still in control. Because Dr. Griffith told me, he says, go into the light. And I didn't. Instead, I saw myself flying through some woods. And I could tell that it looked like it was late fall, because the trees still had leaves, but it looked like a really cold, brisk night. So anyway, a few months later, I'm floating on like the second or third floor of this big mansion. I'm looking in the window of this room. There's a big fire in the fireplace. No one's in the room, but there's a painting over the fireplace. It's a still life. It's a picture of a sun and some fruit. And I'm telling Dr. Griffith, I wanted to see one of my paintings one more time before I left Earth. So, and then she kept telling me, now go into the light, but I wouldn't do it. I kept wanting to go and see this painting. So anyway, after we had finally got with through, she said, okay, so now I want you to go to a life when you were a woman. Go to a life when you were a female. And I almost broke the hypnotic state, because I almost started laughing. And I thought, yeah, that's going to happen. Because, again, I'm thinking the whole time, this is just my subconscious mind bring up, movies you've seen, TV programs or books about this thing, and that's all. You're regurgitating it into a story.
Right.
That's all it is. And I thought, so there's how in the world could you go back to a life as a woman if you've never been a woman? I thought, this is going to be the deal breaker right here. This is not going to work. Uh-huh. She said, go to your life like you're a woman. So again, there's 3 or 4 seconds of gray fog, and all of a sudden, I'm seeing. When I'm seeing again, I'm in another forest. But this is not in the valley. This is all level ground, and I'm standing in front. It looked like a big monument or altar, big, and I could tell that it looked like Greek architecture. And I looked down, and sure enough, I'm in the body of a woman. I remember thinking at the time how bizarre that was. I thought, boy, this is really, really funny. And I'm beginning to think to myself, your mind's making all this up, and you can see where people would believe this is past lives, even though your mind's just making it all up.
And so your first life, Robert, that you tap into is kind of the quintessential caveman experience, right? You see yourself as kind of walking this valley, carrying a large tree trunk stick with you, and the smell's horrible in your cave, and you learned in that life what it was like to die and be alone. Your second life, you're an artist. And although kind of a conflicted artist, you're painting portraits and doing art that you're not necessarily interested in, but you're celebrated somewhat, and you're an artist. Third life, she dips in and says, okay, you're a woman. And now this is really kind of fighting the paradigm for you, right? Because, it's one thing to kind of have experienced these other two, but now she's put you into the mindset that you were at one point a woman. And again, talk to the listeners for us. Tell us what it was like when you came to that consciousness and you realized you're looking through the eyes of a woman. What was that like?
Well, at the time I'm trying to figure this out. Wait a minute, how could this be? I've never been one. Then I'm thinking, everybody's seen the movie Some Like It Hot, with Tony Curtis and
right. Jack Lemmon.
Everybody,
Yeah.
remember Tom Hanks' very first TV program was about him dressing up like a woman.
Bosom buddies, sure.
Yeah, bosom buddies. So I'm just thinking, what this is, Bob? This is just this. You're bringing back these old TV programs and movies. That's all it is. You're bringing them back and you're regurgitating it to make it look like it. I'm trying to find some explanation in my mind for this. So anyway, we go through this life as a Greek girl, and again, it's fun, and I still think it's fun. I'm still enjoying myself. It's kind of, like I said, a cool thing. We go through this life as the woman, and I ended up getting thrown out of the. I worked at this temple as a helper. I was supposed to help her in the temple, but part of the requirements were that you had to be a virgin. Well, apparently I broke the rules because I ended up having a little child, and they got rid of me. And they either sold me or gave me to a man. And he took me to a farm. Well, he died real soon afterwards. And so I took my daughter. So I'm stuck with this little girl. And at the time, I know I'm realizing that, boy, my life's going to be hard if you got a little kid tagging along. So I bring the child back to the temple and give her to the temple to be, so they can, she can be raised in the temple and help and be like I was, a helper there. And I remember, it's always funny. I remember it's funny, because I was trying to rationalize to myself and to Dr. Griffith, I'm telling the story, that doing this was really a good thing for my little girl. And all the time I knew it wasn't. All the time I knew. And I felt this terrible guilt. And I'm thinking how silly this is, because I felt this terrible guilt about giving the daughter up because it'd be easy for me without her. And I'm thinking, this is stupid. This is just a made-up story. Why would you feel really guilty? I felt this terrible, terrible sense of guilt. So anyway, I gave my daughter up and went to a town close to an ocean or a sea, and I was involved in fishing, something to do with the fishing thing there. And Dr. Griffith took me to my death. And what happened is this woman got somehow caught in the nets and drowned. And the frightening part was when I was going through the drowning scene, I could taste salt water.
Wow!
All of a sudden, I could taste salt water as I was drowning. And that was bizarre. And again, I think, boy, how's that possible? I couldn't imagine how hypnotism could be that strong.
Sure.
So anyway, Dr. Griffith finally got me out of this life, and believe me, I was glad to get out of this one. There's nothing like drowning, and that would tell you the truth, that wasn't the bad part. The whole life, the bad part was the guilt I felt in this life about giving my daughter up, so I wouldn't have to be saddled with her while I'm trying my way through the world. So Dr. Griffith told me to go to the life. I really felt good. Dr. Griffith finally told me, he said, okay. He said, I want you to go to the most recent life you lived on Earth before Bob Snow. He said, go to the person you were before you were Bob Snow. So I said, okay. So there's 3 or 4 moments of gray fog, and all of a sudden I can tell I'm back in the artist body again. Because I'm standing there at the moment, I'm painting a portrait. I'm just finishing it. But interesting enough, the portrait was of a hunchback woman. So I thought it was really bizarre at the time. I thought, boy, here I'm painting this portrait of a hunchback woman. I thought, boy, where in the world would I get this from? So anyway, I can see I'm doing the very last few strokes on it. And like I said, the regression was so clear, I could see every single brush stroke in this painting. And again, I'm telling Dr. Griffith that I'm painting a portrait, but I hate painting portraits. I just hate painting portraits. So I described the portrait to her, and then we go to another scene where I'm walking in the garden.
Well, Bob, could I ask?
Yeah.
You're seeing yourself painting this woman. Are you looking past the canvas and seeing the actual hunchback woman as well?
Both, yes. I can see the canvas, and I can see her standing there. It was as vivid, as clear as anything in reality. I could see every single brush stroke on that painting. I could see her. That was the interesting part of the whole thing. The clarity of it was so amazing how clear it was.
So Bob Snow's consciousness is watching this. Did Bob Snow, and I feel weird talking about you in the third person, but did Bob Snow try to communicate with this person through this vessel, through the artist?
No. I would you know what this is? Again, I thought this is just fun. This is nothing. This is not real. This is nothing but hypnotism, bringing up old memories from your subconscious mind. I didn't really need to investigate this or do anything like that, because again, I thought this is just this is just a fun thing you're doing. It's nothing real. There's nothing serious about it. And it's over. It's just your subconscious mind bring up old memories, reordering them into look like stories. That's all it is.
Bob, I know this is going to sound weird. In the next hour, I have an experiment idea that I'd like to try with you.
All right.
Well, I'd like you to do, and then report back to me because I don't want to be involved. I'm too terrified. No, I'm just kidding. But I do have an idea, and I want to talk to you about it because you sound like the kind of guy that, even though you've had these experiences, there's still some skepticism to what you're exactly encountering.
Yeah. Well, there was, and let me tell you again. It was one of those things. If I hadn't proved it completely to myself, I still wouldn't have believed it. Because in this life, again, I went on for a couple more scenes in this life. I went to a garden. I told you I heard piano playing when I was my wife. Then Dr. Griffith told me, he says, go to the next scene in your life. Go 5 years forward. And okay, and I'm going through it again. It was like a gray fog. Then before the next scene come, all of a sudden I blurted out. Again, I didn't know I was going to say this. I had no idea what I was talking about. I said, she died of a blood clot. The doctor said she died of a blood clot. I had no idea who this person was talking about, other than I knew it was some woman tremendously important to him. Because all of a sudden I felt like I wanted to cry. I could feel my chest like you wanted to start crying. And I thought how silly it was because I had no idea who this person was talking about. But he kept saying she died of a blood clot. The doctor said she died of a blood clot. Well, then at that moment, I had a recorder I had brought along. I had brought along a recorder with a 60-minute tape, snapped off a big loud click, and I opened my eyes, and the regression session was over. And the funny thing is now, I'm feeling kind of silly now because I'd gone there feeling so sure. Number one, I didn't think I could be hypnotized, number one. Number two, I felt kind of silly because I felt like, gee, Bob, you come in here feeling so sure, and now you're babbling like an idiot for the last, 30, 35, 40 minutes. And I was really, to tell you the truth, I was kind of embarrassed. I kind of wanted to get out of there. And Dr. Griffith is saying, well, can you see how all this relates to your present life and all that? And I really at the moment I couldn't, and I bumbled something to her about it. I need to think about it. And so I got out of there as fast as I could. But, I go out and sit in my car after that, and I'm thinking about it. And what really bugged me about the whole thing, not that I believed it was true or anything, I just couldn't get over the clarity of it. How clear. I mean, it wasn't like it's your imagination or a daydream. This was reality. It was that clear. It was like reality.
Could you smell? Could you feel the texture of the paintbrush in your hand?
I could feel. I could feel. I could smell. I could hear. I could taste. I could taste the salt water. I could smell the cave. I could feel. It was amazing. It was called. I didn't realize later it was called a full sensory regression. I had no idea what that was because I never knew about regression therapy before this time. But anyway, afterwards, I got out of my car, and I'm just thinking about it. I'm trying to think, what the hell just happened? Because this is not what I expected at all. I expected to go there, sit for an hour, and absolutely nothing happened. And I go back to the psychologist and say, see, I told you so. And now I didn't know what to do. I really didn't know what to do. And I kept trying to pull my mind, what could this have been? Where could these memories have come from? And I kept telling myself finally, I said, hey, these are just old forgotten memories from this life brought back. Forget it, Bob. Just let it go. Forget it. But, I really couldn't. No matter what I did, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And actually, for the first couple of years after the regression, if I closed my eyes, I could still see the painting. I could see every brush stroke in the painting. I could remember see it that clear. And I could see most of the scenes of regression that clear for the first couple of years. It's since, of course, faded out. But for the first couple of years, I could see it. And every time I closed my eyes, I could still see the regression. And that was kind of spooky too, because you couldn't figure, why would you still remember it now? I mean, how could you have these memories this clear? So I kept telling myself, just forget about it, Bob. It was all you got a rational explanation. It's just subconscious memories reordered. That's all it is. Let it go.
Right,
but I just couldn't.
A veteran police detective, Robert Snow, our guest this evening. His book, Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic, the true story of a police detective's reincarnation. Fascinating 3 different lives that he talked to us about, these experiences that he had as a caveman, an artist, and a woman. And still skeptical, still questioning the things he had. I have to know, first of all, Robert, did you go back to your psychologist friend and tell her what happened?
Later I did. Yeah, later when I was trying to investigate what I had seen, I went back for a second regression. See if I could find more information about the artist, and I did then, yes.
How long between regressions was there?
Oh, it was probably several months. Because first off, what I did with this is, again, I kept telling myself, Bob, forget about it. It's nothing. It's just your subconscious mind coming up and coming up, coming up. So I just kept telling myself, forget it. It is nothing. It's nothing. But I couldn't. I just think about it constantly. I would think about it every day. Just day in, day out. I'd think about it dozens of times a day. I think about it. I close my eyes. I could still see the Hunchback Woman painting. And I thought, boy, it started bothering me after a while because I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I could see that I was becoming obsessed with this. And believe me, as a police officer, I've dealt with a number of people who are obsessed. And believe me, it seldom turns out good for the person. It really doesn't.
Right.
And so I thought, boy, Bob, you're becoming obsessed about this. Let it go. And I just couldn't. So finally, I decided, well, what I need to do? What I need to do is find one of these two paintings, find the Hunchback Woman or the still life I saw in the mansion. If you find them, you'll remember where you saw them in this life, and everything will click. I mean, I figured I'd find, I'd find one of the paintings. I'd write, oh yeah, I saw that, 3 or 4 years ago at this one exhibition, and that's how you knew about it. And there was a little blurb at the bottom about the artist, and that's where you got all this information at. I figured that's the explanation for this. That's all it is. So I finally decided what I need to do. I need to find one of these paintings. So I had a plan. Now this was back pre-internet days. So in those days you couldn't just type a Hunchback Woman portrait into a search engine and on the internet, because there was no internet then. So these days you had to actually go to the library. So I thought I'd go to the Annapolis Public Library, start looking. I figured, come on, how many paintings of Hunchback Women could there be? I mean, come on, that couldn't be a popular subject. And so I thought it should be pretty easy to find. Once I found it, I'd suddenly remember where I saw it at, and everything solved it. There's no supernatural explanation or anything. It's all, you just saw it. You remember you actually saw it, but you forgot it. But your subconscious mind doesn't forget anything. All your memories are stored there, and that's all it is. So I go to the library, and like a lot of best laid plans, it didn't work out like I thought. Number one, the Annapolis Public Library had hundreds and hundreds of art books, and again, I started looking. I would go I go on my lunch hour, and I sometimes go on weekends. And I ended up going through every single book and every single art book in our public library and didn't find either painting. And that really started bugging me. And I was like, wait a minute. Come on. How could that be? You can't the problem was these were too vivid and too much detail on these paintings. I know to just made them up on my mind. I just was convinced they had to be real paintings. So then I visited a number of art galleries around the area and started art dealers. I figured, well, come on, I described the painting to them, good Lord, so they sure ought to know where this was at, and all that thing. And again, absolutely no success. But again, these are pre-internet days. And I found out in pre-internet days, if you wanted a painting, you had to know where it was at, because there was no listing at that time of where to find paintings at. There was no central listing of where you could, if you wanted a certain painting, where it was at. You had to know which dealer had it. So I checked all the art, maybe a couple dozen art dealers and galleries around Marion County, around where I live, and didn't get nothing, come to zero. So then I started going to some different bookstores, check their art books, because they had books that the library didn't have. I went to all the bookstores around B. Dalton and half-price books and all of them around here, and went through their art books and didn't find a thing. Now it's getting bugged me, because it was kind of like, wait a minute, you had to have seen this somewhere. So finally, I had no luck at all doing that. I finally said maybe I need to go get more information on the artist. That's when I'll remember where I saw him at in this life. So I went back to Dr. Griffith for a second session, and it was kind of funny because again we went to this along the same process, and again I went back in the same kind of hypnotic state. But every time she'd tell me go back to the artist's life, nothing had happened. Nothing. I went back to 3 different past lives in this regression, but they were so far back in history, you really can't verify them if they're true or not true type thing. But I could do absolutely nothing, get nothing from the artist. Every time she asked me to do it, nothing would happen. At the end of the session, I asked her why. She says, you know everything you need to know. At the time, I didn't think that was so. I thought, no, I don't know anything. Turned out she was right. So actually, at the end, finally after this, I finally had to give up, to tell you the truth. Now, I was in charge of a homicide branch at the Annapolis Police Department for a number of years, and we had a very high clearance rate here. We had 83% clearance rate here while I was the commander of homicide. And that's an exceptional rate.
What does that mean? What does clearance rate mean?
That means you solved the case.
Oh, very good. All right.
Yeah, we had an excellent rate when I was here. But that still means that 17% of your murders go unsolved. And they go unsolved because you don't have enough evidence. Or the evidence just dead ends. And I figured that's what this case was. This was a dead end case. I don't have enough information, enough evidence to go any further. And I just figured, Bob, you're going to have to forget about this case. That's all there is to it. This is going to be one of those unsolved cases that goes on the shelf. Because, I couldn't think of anything else to do. I mean, I checked every art book I could find in our Marion County around Indianapolis. You know, I talked to art dealers. I went back for secondary regression. I mean, I couldn't think of anything else to do. So I finally said, that's it. I'm just going to let it go. I'm going to let it go. I'm not going to think about it anymore. Just let it go. Of course, that sounds good, but it didn't work. I still kept thinking about it all the time. But anyway, it was getting close to a couple months after this. It was getting close to our anniversary. And my wife and I were planning on going on a trip somewhere on our anniversary. So she called me one day at work and says, what do you think about going to New Orleans? I thought, well, it sounds like fun. I'd never been there. She'd never been there. Why don't we go there for, our anniversary was in April, and I thought it'd be a good time to go down to, when it wouldn't be so hot and everything, and you could go down and enjoy yourself. So I said, okay. So we decided we scheduled a trip for New Orleans. So we went down to New Orleans, and we spent, about, I think, like 5-6 days. We had a really great time doing all the stuff in New Orleans has to do. Well, the last day, our plane didn't leave until it was the evening. So we had the whole day left. And I told her, why don't we do window shopping in the French Quarter? Because at nighttime, we'd go in the French Quarter and visit all the different bars and listen to the music and what have you. But I noticed as we was going to their places, they're all kind of really neat shops and stores in the French Quarter, but they were closed when we went late at night down to the French Quarter. So we decided to spend the last day kind of window shopping in the French Quarter. And so we did. We went window shopping, all these different art stores. They had antique stores and they have historical memorabilia stores. And finally we get to Royal Street. And Royal Street these days in New Orleans was all art galleries. So we started looking through the art galleries, and they had some beautiful paintings in some of these art galleries, some beautiful, beautiful paintings. And we started walking down the street. And I noticed as we're walking down the street, the galleries were kind of getting smaller, the paintings more obscure. So finally we get to a small gallery at the end of the street, and it's a two-story. It said modern art upstairs. My wife likes modern art, so she went upstairs. So I'm just walking along the first floor. I'm looking at paintings. I don't recognize any of the paintings. I certainly don't recognize the artists. They're actually very kind of obscure paintings by obscure artists. I'm just walking along looking at the paintings. I get to the corner, and there's a portrait sitting on an easel. And I glance at it, walk by. It was kind of like I walked into a glass wall. I stepped so abruptly. I turned around. It was a portrait of the hunchback woman. By this time I'd been a police officer for over 30 years, and I'd encountered a lot of scary situations in my career, a lot of frightening, scary situations. I don't think I've ever been quite as startled and frightened as I was right that moment. Because I turned around, and all of a sudden there it was. And it's like, it's one of those things where things like this might happen on the X-Files. They might happen in the movies. They don't happen in real life. They do not happen in real life. And I'm staring at this painting, and I'm trying to come grips with what happened, what's happening here. And, I'm trying to, because I'm thinking, well, no. Then I'm thinking, no, this looks like the painting. It's close, but it's not it. But if I close my eyes, I can still see the painting, every brushstroke. Open my eyes, and that was the painting. And the thing about police work is you get involved in a lot of dangerous situations and in frightening ones, but you have training and experience, so you know what to do. Even though it's a little scary, you know what your best action to take is. You know what the likely reaction of the person you're dealing with is going to be. But in this case, I had no experience, no training. I had no idea what to do. And actually, I just kind of, for a while, I was thinking, what if I'm not really here? What if I'm in a nursing home somewhere? I'm just dreaming I'm here. I've had a stroke.
So that's making more sense to you than the fact that you're encountering reincarnation.
Because this is too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence. I mean, come on. I mean, what's the odds of me searching for months and months for this painting to just stumble on by accident? I mean, it was too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence. And I kept trying to sort this out. There's got to be some. And I thought for a long time, I wonder if I am in a nursing home. I'm not really here. I'm in a nursing home. I'm in some kind. I'm got wires hooked up on tubes running in me, and this kind of thing. But after a few moments, nothing's happened. You're still there, and so finally, what happened? And I'm staring at this painting for 3 or 4 minutes. One of the salesmen come over, and apparently he seen me staring at it. He asked me, he says, "I bet you think how nice to look over your fireplace, aren't you?" And I just got started, but I thought, I asked him, I said, "Well, who's the painter? I don't recognize the work." He said, "Hang on a second." He said, "I got a bio on him." So he walks over to the desk, and he probably looks through some papers. He brings the paper over, and it said, J. Carroll Beckwith. And I'm reading, and he had like a paragraph of biography on him, and I'm reading it, and every time I'm reading it, Yeah, I'm getting this tachyphysical because there's, like I said, there was I think it was like 5 different things in his biography that matched what I'd seen in the regression. And that, it was now because it's already frightening enough to find it, and this is getting worse. And I'm digging, I'm searching, really desperately searching for some rational explanation for this. There's got to be some rational explanation for this. You just got to find it. Excuse me. And then I realized what it was. I thought, wait a minute, Bob, you've seen this painting somewhere in the last, 10 years or so. There was a little blurb about the artist at the bottom, and that's where it's all come from. Now, finding it in New Orleans like this is one heck of a coincidence, one bizarre coincidence, but I could live with that. But I said, that's all it is, Bob. You just seen this painting somewhere before, and that's all, and you read the blurb, and that's all it is. It's that there's nothing supernatural. So I asked the dealer, I said, hey, I've seen this painting somewhere before. Has this been on an exhibition or museum? He said, no. He said, you haven't seen the painting before. He said, it's been in a private collection for years. He said, let me be honest with you. He says, Carol Beckwith wasn't that famous, so I can let this go pretty cheap.
Here he is, face to face with the painting that has haunted his memories, his past life memories, still trying to rationalize it. Maybe he's seen this art piece before, read a blurb about it somewhere, but that doesn't explain how you could remember the details of every brushstroke as though you painted it yourself. Bob, is that still playing part of your mind?
It is, but it always was the whole time afterwards. But again, I'm just thinking. Again, I'm still of the mindset that this is just subconscious memories from this life that you brought up. You've seen this painting somewhere, and you saw a little blurb about the artist. You just when you were under hypnosis, you just regurgitated it, reordered it into a storyline. That's all there is to it. So what I thought at the time, actually, fortunately, at that moment when I'm talking to the dealer, my wife come back down from upstairs, and she asked me ready to go, and I told the dealer, well, let me think about it. I think they wanted like $5,000 a painting, and there was no way I was going to buy a $5,000 painting, then get it home and remember, oh, yeah, I saw that 4 years ago in an art gallery in Cincinnati. Now I'm stuck with a $5,000 painting of a hunchback woman I don't know. Because people have asked me in the past why I didn't buy the painting, and that's exactly why I didn't buy it. I figured I'd see it in this life, and I'm not going to pay $5,000 for something and find out, oh, yeah. Because Beckwith paintings don't have a lot of resale value. He simply wasn't that good. So anyway, so my wife come down, we left. But I thought, what's up? Well, good. Now I have like murder cases, a lot of times murder cases you think you can't solve, you put them on the shelf. Occasionally new evidence will come along, and you reopen the case. Well, now I had new evidence. I had a man's name, I had his date of birth, date of death. I thought, well, good. Now I can go back to Indianapolis. I can research this J. Carroll Beckwith. Then it'll come to me. It'll come to me where I've seen it before. Where have I heard about Beckwith before? I forgot. That's all I had to do. So I got back to Indianapolis and went back down to the public library again. Again, this is pre-internet days. And so I go to the library and I asked the library to help me. Well, I was kind of stunned because there was hardly any information at all about Beckwith. He simply was not a very famous artist. He was only thing I could find is that he was a portrait painter during the late 1800s, early 1900s, but he never really painted any paintings of significance. He has no world-class paintings that anyone would ever remember. He painted mainly portraits because he needed the money, and he did some other things too, but none of them are memorable. None of them are, like I said, are world-class paintings that you'd see anywhere. He simply wasn't that good. And that kind of bothered me too, because I think, wait a minute, how can I know anything about this guy if you had to dig, and that's all the information there is? I mean, when the librarian come back, there was maybe a half a page of information out of maybe a dozen books. Small books on American painters, he's not in. Now, big books, there'll be maybe a couple sentences on him. That's all there'd be. So that was really bugging me. So the librarian there at the public library says, why don't you go up to the art museum library? He said, they have a much more extensive art library. He said, you probably have more information on Beckwith up there. So I thought, well, that's a good idea. So I left the public library, drove up the north side of Annapolis to the art museum, and went to their library. And I told the librarian what I wanted, and she said, okay. So she helped me. And again, she found a little bit more, but not really that much more on Beckwith. There's simply, and I think, again, I was kind of saying, is this all you got? And she says, he wasn't that famous. There's just not that much information. He simply wasn't that famous.
Is that a little bit of a gut punch, Robert? You're like,
no, not really.
Oh,
it wasn't a gut punch because at that time I didn't care. Right. I didn't know who he was. But I thought it was more bizarre than how could I know these things? Because the little information she found for me there, again, everything I'd find, there'd be nothing big, but you'd find one little point of something you said. Something I had said during regression would be in these little pieces of information. One little point. Again, you'd find one more little point. And it's like, wait a minute, how did I know that? And, you know, I end up at by the time I'd finished with the Art Museum Library, I counted up. I had found 10 different things that I had said that were correct. Nothing. I hadn't found nothing yet I'd said that wasn't correct. I found 10 things that were correct. And it was starting to bug me, like, wait a minute, how could you know these things? Because this guy is simply not that well known. So, anyway, I noticed, though, as she got one of the books that had some Beckwith in it was a book on John Singer Sargent, the very famous American painter. Well, it turns out that he and Beckwith are very good friends, and they went to the same art school together in Europe, and they actually shared an apartment for 5 years. But anyway, the footnote said that the information for this anecdote by Sargent came from J. Carroll Beckwith's diaries, which are kept on file at the National Academy of Design in New York City. And I thought, another little thing. She found me in a little blurb. It said that this information came from the unpublished autobiography of J. Carroll Beckwith, again kept at the National Academy of Design in New York City. So I thought, boy, you know, this is starting to really bug me, because I set out with the intent of proving this is all baloney, and everything I kept finding, it kept pointing in the opposite direction. Nothing really big yet. Just small little points. Like I said, like for one of the books in the Art Museum Library said that Beckwith mainly painted portraits during his life because he needed money, but that he hated painted portraits. And I remember I said that 3 or 4 times to Dr. Griffith, that I hated painting portraits, but I needed the money. And you're thinking, I remember at the time thinking to myself, well, maybe that's true for a lot of artists. Maybe this is not so unique. Maybe a lot of artists didn't like doing it. Maybe that, you know. So I wasn't going to take this as any kind of conclusive proof. But I knew what I needed to do is I need to take a look at his diaries and his autobiography. I thought, if I look at this, and now is the point where I thought what I was looking for, I wasn't looking for proof that was true. I was looking for 1 or 2 things that weren't true. I thought if I could find 1 or 2 things I had said during regression that weren't true, then it's not really true. It's not a real past life, because you couldn't. For example, Dr. Griffith asked me at my Beckwith life, says, "What did you regret about this life?" I said, "I regret we didn't have children because my wife couldn't have children." So, I thought if Beckwith has children, then that's it. This is baloney. It's not a real story, because how can I say we didn't have children? We did have children.
Right.
Like I said, for example, I seen him drinking a glass of wine. I thought, well, if he's a teetotaler or he didn't drink wine, then that busted. So what I was looking for, this point, I was starting to get a little desperate, because I kept finding these points that went the opposite direction. I thought, let me find 1 or 2 things about him that wasn't true, that I had said wasn't true. Then it's not really a past life. There's some kind of garbage, obviously, but it's nothing supernatural past life. So what I did is I finally wrote a letter to the National Academy of Design asking about the diaries and autobiography. And they said, well, naturally we don't know them out because they're old and fragile, but there have been a microfilm made of them. And you could order that through Interlibrary Loan. So I did. I went to the library and I ordered his diaries and autobiography through Interlibrary Loan. Well, it came a week or 2 later. It came, and I found it was kind of a startling surprise. Beckwith started his diary at age 19 and made his last entry at age 65, the day before he died, and he had over 17,000 pages of diary. I thought, holy smokes, what do you do with 17,000 pages? And I thought, well, let me look at his autobiography. Maybe that'll be easier. Unfortunately, he started his autobiography in the spring of 1917. He was sick in the last years of life. He had endocarditis, which is eventually what killed him, which infects the heart valves, and he couldn't stand up any longer. So he's doing some writing at the end of his life, and so he started his autobiography. But unfortunately, he only got 21 pages done before he died, and so that was really no help at all. So what I finally did after looking at the diary, and I just couldn't decide, what do you do? Could you just give it up? And for a while, I actually sent the microphone back. I was going to give it up, but this obsession wouldn't let go of me. The whole thing, I kept thinking about it constantly. It simply would not go of me. So finally, what I eventually ended up doing was I ordered the diaries back. I had a hard copy made of it, of 17,000 pages. And it took me about a little over a year. I read every single page of the diary. It was quite an undertaking, because don't talk about it. Like I said, reading a diary like this is tough, because people do in your diary, you just do 5 or 6 sentences every day to remind you of something happened. You never go into great detail. But anyway, so I got the hard copy diary and I started reading it, and it was kind of tedious. But the problem being, again, is that I kept finding these one little things. It's always one little thing another. But what I did before I actually had a copy of the diary made is I went through the tape I had made of my regression. I got sit down and listened to it, and I wrote down everything can be proved or not proved. I'm looking for things I can prove, disprove, or prove or not disprove. I found that there are 28 things I had said during regression, dates, places, the cause of death, that can be proven or not proven. So I made this list of 28, and I found out I'd already proved 10 of them just through the little research I'd done. So I started reading a diary, trying to find one or two things that wasn't true. But a lot of times in life, when you start, and this happens a lot in police work, you start an investigation, you're pretty sure which way it's headed. Sometimes it takes a left turn on you, and just didn't go the way you think it's going to go. That's what happened here. Instead of finding the disproving factor, I kept finding one factor after another factor that proved what I said. And actually, what the interesting part was, I said that we did that. I regret we didn't have children. My wife couldn't have children. Well, I was reading in the diary on October 24th, 1888, which coincidentally is 29 years to the day before he died. His wife had a very serious miscarriage, and it was so serious that she couldn't have children after that. It was kind of funny because he wrote enough times in his diary how much he wanted to have children, but they couldn't because his wife couldn't have children. But probably the one that pushed me over the edge, where I thought, "No, Bob, this is something a lot bigger than you think it is when I had said during the last regression that she died of a blood clot. The doctor said she died of a blood clot. Again, I didn't know who it was at the time. Just as a woman is very, very important to this man, extremely important to him. And so I thought, well, it has to be, if somebody, I thought that would be a factor. If somebody in his life, a very important woman, died of a blood clot, this is not really his life. When I got to December 5th, 1886...
Hold on.
He writes,
we'll find out what happens when you get to that part of the journal. Our guest, Robert Snow, or is it? We'll find out more about the story when we return. It's Reincarnation tonight on the Best in Paranormal Talk Radio. This is Darkness Radio. All right, we are in the thick of it as we're watching a man slowly piece together a past life and proving that all of the things that were recorded, all of the points that he made were coming out to be true. And Bob, now you're thinking that even if one of these things is wrong, that there's a fly in the ointment, but you're not finding any flaws in this.
No, and that's what kept bugging me. When I got about 20, I proved 20 to 28. It's like, well, now you're going to think, because again, in murder investigation particularly, most of the detectives start in the case, you think suspect A did it, and you're heading that way. You're getting all the evidence heading that way. Every once in a while, cases take a left turn, and you find it wasn't suspect A after all, suspect B type thing. Well, that's what this case. I'm heading this way, but my case ain't going. The evidence ain't pointing the way I think it's going to point. Again, especially when I got to the point about his wife had a miscarriage and they couldn't have children. But I think the real thing that pushed me over the edge, where I thought, boy, this is really something real. I got to December 5th, 1886. Beckwith writes that his mother was in church that day and died of a stroke caused by a blood clot. And at that moment, because I knew there were only two women who could actually be so important to this person that it would make him want to cry. It was either his wife, who he loved dearly, or his mother, who he really loved. His mother was the only person who ever encouraged him in his art career. His dad always told him that being an artist was the best way he knew of starving to death. But his mother had always encouraged his artwork, and he just loved his mother dearly. When I got to that date and it said she died of a stroke caused by a blood clot, I think that was the pushing factor. That was the factor that made me say, you ain't going to find what you're looking for, Bob. All you're going to find is more proof. As it turned out, before it was over with, I was able to prove all 28 of the facts I'd said were true. Now, you can make some guesses on people. And when I first started this, I kept trying to rationalize. When I'd find something that was true, I kept to rationalize. For example, I said that when I died, I rose over to a large city. Well, Beckwith died in New York City. Well, that certainly fit the regression. But I remember trying to rationalize myself. Okay, Bob, how many people die in large cities every year? Probably the majority of people die in large. Probably 50-60% of people die in large cities. That's nothing really. That's not really proof. Then I said I thought it was fall because I felt like it was a cold night, but the leaves still had, the trees still had their leaves. Well, he died in October 24th. It was fall too. Then again, to rationalize myself, Bob, come on, a fourth of people every year die in the fall. So again, this is not proof. This is not. I kept trying to tell myself this. Every time I'd find one of the points that proved it, I tried to rationalize myself how it wasn't true, how it was just part. They could, like I said again, a lot of people die in the fall type thing. But once you get to things like his wife can have children, and particularly his mother died of blood clot, you can't make as many guesses. You can't make 28 lucky guesses and get every single one of them right, and it's not going to happen. And so at the end, I had to basically accept the fact that I know stuff about Beckwith's life is not recorded hardly anywhere. How are you going to guess that a woman in Port, they died of a blood clot or this kind, or that he did, for example, I saw him drinking wine at the cafe, and I was convinced at this time during the late 1800s, men who drink whiskey. But Beckwith drank wine, and he mentioned a couple times in his diary that people thought he was a little odd for drinking wine, but he developed a taste for wine when he was in France for art school. And you kept finding these things, and after a while, it finally pushed me the other direction where you have to admit to yourself, Bob, there's no way you could make 28 correct guesses on somebody's life. You can't get all 28 of them right. This was actually Carl Beckwith's life.
That is one of the more astounding stories of reincarnation. I mean, what a paradigm shifter. You've had this happen. Now, I mentioned that I had an experiment that I'd love to try. And, I don't know if you'd be open to this. I mean, Robert, have you closed that chapter? Are you satisfied? Are you done? Is there any way that you would reopen and try something?
No, the thing is about it, people ask me, have you gone back for another regression? The problem is, I've studied everything there is. I've read 17,000 pages of his diary. Okay, I've read his autobiography. I went to New York to find he kept scrapbooks his whole life, and I went to New York to find a scrapbook. I know so much about him now that anything I saw, how would I know where it comes from?
Right, but here's what my thoughts were. And I don't know where you stand on this. There are people that believe that we can not only visit our past lives, that we can visit our future lives. We can see future life regression or progression, however you want to look at it. Two things I would love to see. You obviously have a very skilled hypnotherapist.
Yes.
It would be fascinating to have you go to her and have her tell you about, bring you to the next life after this one, the immediate next life, and see whatever information you could get about that person, name, anything like that. Wouldn't it be fascinating to do something along those lines and send a message to yourself? And much like the Doc Brown scene from Back to the Future, where you write that and then have that letter delivered, have a message given to that person on a specific date, tying you back to that. And with that said, when you're back there painting, when you're in that past life and you're having that moment, and you can feel and smell and hear and taste, it would be an interesting experiment to see if you could, in fact, affect something that would change something that you could physically go see now. Could you look at that?
In this case, you have to believe that the future is already preordained.
But listen, in your world, reincarnation wasn't possible. And now that top has been torn off.
Believe me, I am still a very, very doubter. But I tell you, it's like people. I've learned since I've written this book. I've run a lot of people who claim to, be also know about the reincarnations. But almost everybody I talk to is someone famous, and they remember themselves as being someone famous in past life. And my feeling about that is, you really can't prove a regression if the person you claim to have been was famous enough that you might have stumbled on the evidence about him in this life.
Right, I agree.
I mean, you might really believe. Now, suppose I had told everybody I was Renoir or Van Gogh, people would say, sure, yeah, you read about him in a book or a movie, or you saw something in a magazine article. That's where it's all come from. To me, before you can prove a past life, the person you claim to be has to be so obscure, there's no real way you could actually stumble on information about them. There's no way you could have actually read something or heard something about them, and this is where the information came from. But, of course, the downside of that is people that are obscure very seldom leave records of themselves. I was very, very fortunate that Beckwith left this diary, or I would never, this would have just simply been an unsolved case forever. But
right.
I'm really, not that I'm saying people are wrong or
but that's what I'm saying,
fibbing or anything, but I just can't.
If you don't want to mess with the future, I think it would be fascinating if you could go see her and have her put you back into the artist, and not that you're looking for more information because you've already done that, but could you have her bring you back to a day in the journal when you are writing in that journal and have you be there, see that, and then in the liner of that journal, could you write, "Hi, Bob"?
You think I could? In other words, you think people could?
Here's the deal: we don't know enough. We don't know enough because I don't know that necessarily the past is truly the past. How do we? There's this great sense that maybe we're living multiple lives or parallel lives all at the same time. But if you're able to get tactile feel and sense, and you called it an immersion regression, it would seem to me that there could be a way to manipulate, maybe in the smallest vein. I mean, I don't want you to put in there, buy MSN or buy Apple, don't do that. But if you could just put, "Hi, Bob," in the liner notes, something that no one else would ever know, it would never mean anything, and the butterfly effect would not cause the world to explode next year. It to me would seem like, boy, that would be worth doing, because if you're able to do something that a lot of people can't, if you're able to do a fully immersive regression, it seems like you're making a deeper connection than most people would in that set. I would think that would be an amazing point to, because you've proven it to yourself already. What if you could actually do something like that and then find proof that you were the one running the hand at that moment? You were the one in charge.
The problem is, being a police officer, and like most police officers, I believe in Occam's razor. Occam's razor basically says the simplest explanation, you use the right one. My explanation of this whole thing is, I simply carry Carol Beckwith's memories in my mind. If I was Carol Beckwith, they're simply in my mind. I don't really believe you could go back and change the past, but personally. Believe me, I'm still a tremendous skeptic. If I hadn't proved all 28 facts, I still wouldn't believe this. I mean, it's that bad. I don't really think you could change the past. I really don't. I'm not sure. To me, the past has already happened. I know you said there's all kinds of theories.
But you were able to visit it. You were able to visit it.
What I think what I was able to do is able to pull up memories from my mind that are in my, again, Occam's razor, the simple explanation. These are simply memories in my subconscious mind of Bear Beckwith's life. That's all it was.
I'll tell you what, Robert, if you're not willing to take that step, I would love, if you'd be willing to put me in touch with that hypnotherapist, I would love to talk to her myself about these possibilities. Not necessarily, or maybe even arrange a little trip to wherever she's at in this point in her life and see if she could do something like that for me that we could actually track and see.
Let me tell you one thing, though. I really don't believe you could change the past. I believe the past, again, I'm very solid into that. I believe this past is done. You can't change it. But I have prepared for the future. I have my gravestone already, and on the bottom of my gravestone, I had them put down, author of Looking for Carol Beckwith. I thought, if I have to do another lifetime when I'm searching for myself again, it sure would be a lot easier, wouldn't it?
Right.
If I went to the graveyard, I'd know I had to write Robert Snow, wouldn't I?
That would be right. See, there you're thinking.
Now, I don't believe the past can be changed, but I figured I could make it easier myself in the future. If I had to come back and do it again one more time, if I'm in the next lifetime, if I'm searching for myself again, searching our past life, if I find this gravestone, I'll know I got the right one. So I made sure to put on the very bottom of it about that I'm the author of Looking for Carol Beckwith. Well, actually, that was the title of the first. This is, of course, the second edition, which is called Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic. But the first edition was called Looking for Carol Beckwith. And I put that on my grave. Again, just prepare in the future. I always believe being prepared.
Well, then that's why, if anything, you need to do a future life progression so you can figure out who you're going to be. Then you can go right in your original manuscript. Hi, Jerry, or hi, Marcia, whoever you're going to be next time, so they know that you know that they know that you know that they know that you know that you were all together.
And again, I'm a tremendous skeptic. I don't believe you can see the future yet either. I don't believe you can change the past. I'm a tremendous skeptic. I don't believe.
But what's so funny, Bob, is
the past or see the future.
You were a skeptic, but you proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt, officer.
Yeah, I know
you are
that.
guilty
that's
of reincarnation.
Because people have asked, sometimes people come with these other theories about, things, and I'm tremendously skeptic, and people have a hard time believing I'm a skeptic, but I still am. I'm still skeptical, very skeptical about things, and I figure, I don't, I'm much more willing to accept things I wouldn't have accepted in the past, certainly, but I'm not easy. People still have to prove things to me. They really do, and I just have a belief that you really can't change the past or know the future. I could, again, like the reincarnation.
But aren't you willing to experiment with that? Aren't you willing to experiment with that?
Oh, possibly. certainly, but I don't believe it can be done. So I'm already a doubter and a skeptic to start off with.
Right, but you were a doubter and a skeptic about reincarnation. That's my point. So,
exactly.
So you can't keep hiding behind that facade because you've already been behind this is impossible. It can't possibly happen, and now you know it can.
Exactly. People want to talk to me about astrology and various things, which I don't believe in. And they'll bring that point up to me. Well, you didn't believe in reincarnation either. And then that point's true. So, you have to be really careful before you just brush something aside as being, that's not true. Because you need to really look at things before you. I found that out from this investigation. You really need to look at things before you just brush things aside. Certainly.
Well, and what about this hypnotherapist? Is she still in business? And I'm sure your book has brought her a bunch of new people.
Yeah, Dr. Griffith, is since retired. She moved out of state and retired. And she told me that she got quite a number of people come to see her after read my book because they wanted to explore their past lives too, But no, she's since retired and then moved on out to down to the south there somewhere.
Well, let's maybe we could talk off air. If you could put me in touch with her, I'd love to talk with her on the show about her work in doing this sometime.
Yeah, I think she'd be happy to. I don't know. I'd say that she may want to be retired and stay retired. I'm not sure. But
well, she could be retired.
I have spoken to her recently, and she asked me to put in my book that she's retired because she still gets a large number of requests from people wanting to do a regression because they read my story.
Sure.
But again, she has since retired. She will make sure that they know she's retired now. Doesn't do that anymore.
It's so funny to hear somebody who's had a life-altering experience like you did. And yet you're so unmovable in some ways. It's so funny because I would think that now, more than anything, you'd be open to all types of possibilities.
But again, I'm a skeptic. That was my point.
Sure.
I would not believe in reincarnation unless it was proved beyond a reasonable doubt. And believe me, I had more evidence in the case than I ever had in any murder case. I wish I had this kind of evidence in a murder case.
Right.
And it had to be that much because let me tell you something. The proving that wasn't the really hard part about this whole thing. Once I had proved all 28 facts, that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was accepting what it means to your worldview. In other words, you have to accept that the whole universe operates on paradigms you didn't know about. That the universe doesn't operate the way you thought it did. It operates on a whole different system. And that you have to kind of realign your life to this new belief system, how the world and the universe really actually works. To me, that was the hardest part because you have to shake all these earlier years of your old belief system. You have to kind of erase that and put a whole new program in there. And that to me, that was really difficult to do, to be able to just completely abandon your previous belief system and take on a whole new one. I mean, even though it was proved to me being beyond the slightest doubt, that took me several years before I could finally accept the fact that the universe works a whole different way than I thought it did. And the people I'd kind of rolled my eyes at and chuckled at, they were right and I was wrong. They knew the truth and I didn't know the truth. And so to me that was the hardest part of this whole investigation, was basically accepting what it means to my worldview.
Bob, you passed on buying the picture at the time because you hadn't convinced yourself enough and you didn't want to own a $5,000 painting of a nobody artist. Now you know. Have you looked for that painting again, and would you buy it now?
Yes, I have looked for it. And fortunately, actually, once I got going investigation and I proved myself, wow, maybe this is right after all, I returned to New Orleans with the idea of either purchasing the painting or at least getting a photograph of it. But when I went back, the art gallery wasn't there anymore. It had gone out of business. And so I did what any police officer does. I started canvassing nearby business to see if I could find out what happened to the painting. Well, I finally found the art dealer who had bought the stock from the out of business art gallery, and I described the painting to him. He remembered the painting, but it was sold. He'd sold it to someone. Then I found a very interesting fact about the art world is that dealers do not give up any information on their customers. They would not tell me anything, and there's a good reason for that. They don't want to make public that you own thousands or millions of dollars worth of artwork. Number one.
Right.
And number two, they don't want other art dealers to know who their customers are. So what this dealer did, he gave me a little card. They had me put my name, address, phone number, and the painting I was interested in. He said, "I'll send it to the owner, and if the owner's interested, he'll call you." I never heard a thing though.
Bob, have you ever thought of returning with a copy of your book and putting the card in there and saying, "Can you send this to them?" Because maybe if he realizes who you are, that might change the perspective of the buyer.
I was always hoping that the book could get enough publicity, the person who owned the painting would finally come forward. And let me say, because actually, to tell you the truth, that was part of the problem with my investigation too. Is that once I couldn't find the painting, how was I going to prove that it actually existed? But actually, in Beckwith's diary, in 1912, he makes 3 different mentions: in October, November, and December 1912. He makes 3 different mentions in his diary about painting the portrait of the hunchback woman. So,
why do you feel that painting was so important to him?
You know what? I think, I don't know. I don't know if it's because it's unique or because it was hard to find. I have no idea why. I have no idea. But he does mention in his diary about painting a hunchback woman. Because again, I was kind of concerned that people say, well, you don't have the painting. How do we know it really existed? Type thing. So I was able to, again, find verification that the painting did exist. And you wonder, was it because I mean, come on, it's got to be kind of unique. Was it because it's unique? That's why it stuck in my memory? I don't know.
Bob, get back in touch with him and get him a copy of your book. I bet that opens more doors for you than you're expecting. Do that for us and then report back. Let me know what happens. Would you do that?
It sounds like a good idea, yes.
All right, Bob Snow, our guest. Pick up a copy of the book yourself, Portrait of a Past Life Skeptic, the true story of a police detective's reincarnation. And should you be listening and you know who owns that painting and you recognize any artwork by that artist, email me, dave@darknessradio.com. We'll put you immediately in touch with Robert Snow. dave@darknessradio.com if you know where the portrait of this hunchback woman is. We'd love to make that connection and help Bob get that painting or at least get a photograph of that painting. All right, we need to take a break. When we come back, Tim, proof of reincarnation in the first 2 hours? Mm-hmm. How about proof of angels for the next hour? Ptolemy Thompkins and Tyler Beddoes joining us next here on Darkness Radio.
Hey, 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 this is NFL Hall of Famer